American Humanist Association Executive Director, Fish Stark, who again was on the panel earlier today, is an organizer, educator, social entrepreneur, and lifelong humanist. He's worked with multiple organizations to promote education and critical thinking skills in children and to empower youth leaders around the world to make changes in their communities. Fish has managed progressive political campaigns, built a nationally recognized peer-to-peer bullying prevention program, and taught students from preschool to high school. And just like Nadine, he's got a huge amount of work in his history and accolades and amazing things that he's done. So I encourage you to look him up online if you want to know more. Today, Fish will be talking about how we can have hope in times like these. He'll share the AHA's perspective on why humanism is poised, not just to grow, but to help solve the American crisis of meaning and connection. So please welcome Fish Stark.
I am here to talk to you today about hope. And I recognize it might seem ironic to come to Florida to talk about hope for the humanist movement. Don't get me wrong, Florida has great exports, like my fiance who grew up in Coral Springs. Do we have any Broward County people here? Yeah, we do. She's a secular Jew and I'm a Unitarian humanist, which makes this an interfaithless marriage. But guys, the men in Florida, the politicians, what are y'all doing? Like, I have to say, I was so inspired by Devin Siebold's comedy last night, I sent Rick Scott a 50-pound bag of sand. It arrives on Tuesday. If I get arrested on Wednesday, you know why. And the one that bugs me the most is your governor. So Ron DeSantis and I, we both went to Yale and Harvard, but that's where the similarities end. When I was a teacher, I didn't drink with my underage students. And I don't have to wear high-heeled boots to tell people I'm 6'1". I gotta say, the irony of telling people they're not allowed to change their body because God gave it to them when you can't tell the truth about being 5'8" is pretty rich, Governor. And if I had his kind of power, I wouldn't use it to kick tens of thousands of kids off Medicaid or reject free federal aid to help low-income parents buy groceries. You might remember I came down here a few months ago and partnered with CFFC and the Humanists of Tallahassee, and the AHA gave thousands of dollars worth of holiday gifts to families affected by Ron's war on the poor. We raised money from humanists around the country, and we called the campaign Stop Ron DeSantis' War on Christmas. And we ran these full-page ads in the Tallahassee Democrat calling him out for failing to serve working families. Because I am tired of the sanctimonious paternalism of these Christian nationalists who tell us we are morally deficient because we don't mouth the right words from their book, but who have selective amnesia about what their own damn book says about feeding the hungry and healing the sick. Humanism is about living the golden rule and loving thy neighbor, not because we are divinely commanded to, but because that is what makes the world safer and stronger and gives us purpose and joy. And if Ron DeSanctimonious thinks there's a belief system that makes people more moral than ours, he's entitled to his opinion, but he's doing a piss-poor job of proving it. You might have noticed the American Humanist Association is sounding a little different these days. We are showing, not telling what humanists believe, because faith without works is dead and humanism without works is just arguing on Twitter. We are throwing the door wide open and finding new language that connects with the tens of millions of Americans who are broadly non-religious and broadly progressive, connecting with them on their terms, not insisting they use our terms. And we are taking on power unapologetically. We're doing what Voltaire showed us how to do, which is using mockery to unmask tyranny. Because that's what humanists do. That is what we have always done. Every movement that has made America freer and fairer, humanists have been there. From Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson uniting us all to cast off kings and establish constitutional religious freedom, to Frederick Douglass, who fought for our country to live up to Jefferson's words that we were all created equal, even when Jefferson couldn't do it himself, to Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan, who fought for women's liberation, Harvey Milk, who fought for queer representation, to the creators of popular science and personal computers and client-centered psychology, to the legislators behind the Dodd-Frank banking reform bill that protected us from corporate greed, and the EMTALA law that protects our right to life-saving medical care regardless of our ability to pay. Humanists have taken up all those tough fights and moved America forward, and we are not going to stop now. I'm one of the lucky ones. I was raised a humanist. Many of you knew my dad, Pete Stark, the first congressman to come out as an open atheist and an open humanist. In my father's house, there were only two sins: cowardice and quitting. My dad taught me there's no glory in easy fights and no honor in being halfway honest. He modeled for me and for many of us the courage that we need to have at a time like this. American humanist Thomas Paine said, "These are the times that try men's souls." He was talking about life under tyranny and the psychological wound of knowing that you are living with something less than liberty. But he also said, we have it in our power to begin the world over again. We have it in our power to begin the world over again. I'm a humanist because I believe in people. I believe in human dignity, that people are inherently equal, worthy, and good without needing to be saved or redeemed. I believe in human responsibility, that our highest good, our highest moral obligation is standing up to help other humans live lives of freedom and flourishing. And I believe in human potential, the idea that there is no problem people can't solve and no truth we can't uncover as long as we live in societies that protect the right to think freely. And we believe that what makes us special and worth fighting for is not an immortal soul or an intelligently designed body, but consciousness. The ability to dream big and imagine better futures for ourselves and our fellow humans from the infinite canvas of a free mind. And that's why I've got no tolerance for defeatism right now. Yeah, we're facing some of the strongest adversaries our movement has ever seen. But there is no human problem that doesn't have a human solution. The fact that no one is coming to save us also means that no one ever has, and yet we're still here. We evolved from fish and built civilization, and we're not going to lose it to a billionaire man baby who makes dumbass exploding trucks, a bankrupt game show host, and a guy so emasculated in his quest for power, he lets racists degrade his wife and asks for more. 3 known atheists posing as Christian fundamentalists in their limitless quest for money and power. Here's the truth. The billionaires and the bishops are trying to distract Americans from the fact that their pockets are being picked. They're trying their best to poke every sore spot in America so they can cut their taxes while we're at each other's throats, so they can funnel our tax money into their mansions and their mega churches. And as always, they're using religion as their tool of control. They've got their followers whipped up into a frenzy, believing that the culture and community and way of life they're attached to will be torn apart and cast aside unless the radical right is in power. But it's not true. It's never been true. Because humanists are not fighting for a world where everyone thinks the way we do. We're fighting for a world where everyone has the freedom to decide for themselves where they draw their inspiration and morality. That Jeffersonian ideal of freedom of conscience, where no one is free to dictate someone else's way of making meaning. That is what scares the bishops and the billionaires. Because they know whether we're black, white, or brown, whether we are immigrant or native born, transgender or not, most of us want the same things. The right to believe whatever we want, the ability to take care of ourselves and our families without having to work 2 jobs, the knowledge that we live in a community that will take care of us if we get old or if we get sick, the dignity of being treated like a human rather than a function in another social media billionaire's money-making algorithm. That's why they have to keep us divided and isolated. That's why they try to pit the genders against each other over the idea of men's mental health, while doing nothing to fix the platforms they own, which they know because they see the data are making all of us more isolated and depressed. That's why they try to stoke racial resentment about crime while they steal $50 billion a year from us in wage theft alone. They have to divide us, distract us, and buy our elections and buy our representatives because they know they can't beat us in a fair fight. Because here's the deal. If you divide Americans between who believes in God and who doesn't, sure, we're the minority. But if you ask about humanist values, if you ask about the freedom of conscience and the worth and dignity of all people and democracy and science, then we are the moral majority. They want us to convince us that religion and secularism are two cliffs with a canyon of mistrust in between, because they want us to forget that 2/3 of Americans say you don't need to believe in God to be moral, including a majority of religious people and a majority of conservatives. And 2/3 of us believe that people are good by nature. They really hate that. And I will tell you as a humanist, my biggest beef with evangelical Christianity is not their belief in God, but their belief in the corrosive idea of original sin. The idea that we are born broken and unworthy, and we need to bend our knee in their direction to matter. They want to convince us that secularism will destroy society, but they're failing because a majority of Americans, including many religious people, believe that religious belief is a matter of personal opinion, not objective truth. Americans believe in the separation of religion and government. 80% of us believe that this is an important constitutional principle, and a majority of Americans believe a secular America does nothing to harm religious liberty. Our majority believes that science, not the Bible, tells us what's real. Our majority believes that we need to protect Medicare and Social Security and free school lunches for kids, because none of this matters if we don't take care of each other. Yes, a majority of Americans have supernatural beliefs. When it comes to what non-religious people believe is true, we are the largest religious minority in America, but we're still one nonetheless. But when it comes to what humanists believe is right, the freedom of conscience, the dignity of workers and families, the belief that civilization comes not from who we exclude, but who we protect, we are the moral majority, and they cannot take that away from us. Under cover of the culture war, the billionaires and the bishops have built an untenable world. A world where we feel dispossessed, where our paychecks go less far, where our voices are diluted by money in politics and a racist electoral college that makes white people's votes count more. A world full of questions that have humanist answers. They want us to accept a world where too many of us live paycheck to paycheck, able to afford less and less as their profits grow. But humanism says that everyone has a right to live with dignity. They want us to live in a world that makes us feel increasingly conditional, valued only for what we produce. But humanism says we're unconditionally valuable just by being who we are. They want us to trust and suspect and despise each other. They calibrate their technologies to push us further apart for profit. But humanism says that we can only find fulfillment and joy by including people, not pushing them away. They want us confused about what to believe, flooding our phones with propaganda and lies about vaccines and climate change and gender-affirming medical care. But humanists believe that we learn about reality through science, not nonsense. American humanist Emma Goldman once brilliantly said, "We only have as much liberty as we have the intelligence to want and the courage to take." And we will be courageous in this fight. The AHA is beefing up our policy team. We're rebuilding our legal center to focus not on manger displays in public parks, but the real and terrifying issue of people in red states losing their jobs, being denied health care, losing custody of their kids for having the temerity to believe differently. The fight is non-negotiable. The fight is not optional. But we have to remember also that the fight isn't everything. To fight in numbers, we have to be able to come together. In other words, we have to give people something to belong to and believe in before we ask them to fight for it. We are up against a weak and tiny enemy, but they have won by keeping Americans divided and depressed. Fully half of people under 30 are struggling with anxiety and depression. 2/3 of people are lonely, and 1 in 5 meet the medical criteria for social isolation. They're not thinking about the Constitution. They're not thinking about the policy papers we put out at the AHA. They're thinking about why anything matters in a world where they can't make rent, can't make friends, and can't pursue happiness, and why not just blow it all up? And into this void has stepped a new generation of snake oil salesmen, from Jordan Peterson to Ben Shapiro to Nick Fuentes, who tell them that confidence comes from imagining yourself at the top of a made-up social hierarchy. That if you just believe you're superior to others and fight for a world that treats you that way, your problems will be solved. And like the cheap high of heroin, it keeps people coming back for more, searching for that initial rush and never finding it because there's nothing there but emptiness. The group that they have sucked in and converted more effectively than anyone else is secular young men. The same types of guys who listened to Sam Harris when I was growing up are listening to Ben Shapiro today. And I don't know about you, but I'm fucking done with that. Humanists love to talk, but we have got to stop talking mostly to ourselves. Not just because we have the opportunity to build a bigger movement, but because we have the opportunity to heal some of the brokenness in America. Some of you know that before I came to the AHA, I studied child psychology, in particular the work of the great humanistic psychologists like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow and John Dewey. And I worked in the tech industry building apps that help children develop positive mental health. What we know, the first thing that we would do with kids, what we learned from Carl Rogers, the forefather of humanistic psychology, is that the building block of wellness, of confidence, is a strong self-concept. Knowing what you believe and why. Knowing your values, your identity, feeling like you have a community, feeling connected to other people. Because once you have those values, you can take action in line with those values, live with self-integrity, and feel empowered as you build a life around your beliefs. That, not hate, is the formula for building confident people. As Vonnegut says, we are healthy when our ideas are humane. That's why the religious right hates social emotional learning, thinks what I used to do is communism, and why they hate talking about empathy and identity. Because they know that the more people have a strong self-concept, when they understand who they are, what they believe, and where they belong, the harder it is for people to tell them lies. The more we welcome people into our communities, the harder it will be for them to divide and distract us. Over the next few years, the AHA is planning to reach out aggressively to the tens of millions of Americans who are broadly secular and broadly progressive and say as loudly and proudly as we can, you are not alone. There are so many people who think the way we do. We are not the modest minority they think we are. We are part of a moral majority that believes in the fundamental American values of free thought and social equality. And we are part of an incredible legacy. We are the intellectual tradition of America's greatest rebels. When you choose humanism, you choose to be a barrier breaker, to be on the side of the abolitionists, the feminists, the authors of the Constitution. You choose to be part of the revolutionaries and pioneers who so believed in challenging the status quo in service of all people that they gave us public schools and Apple computers and reproductive justice. Because as the billionaires and the bishops wreck our country, as they hawk their dumbass trucks on the White House lawn, and slash and burn the social safety net to give tax breaks to their rich friends, as they hike our grocery prices and sink our pensions, people are going to be looking for something different. They're going to be looking for something outside of the institutions that have failed them. And we want to be there when people go looking for something to belong to and believe in. We will be there for anyone who believes in the golden rule but not in God. For anyone who believes in compassion, not confession. For anyone who believes in love thy neighbor, not trust and obey. For anyone who believes that the best and greatest reward is living well and helping others on this earth and in this life because it is the only thing that is promised us. That's humanism. It has been here since the founding. It is written into our DNA. It terrifies the Know-Nothing Alliance that's controlling Washington, D.C. right now. They're worried they can't stop it, and they're right. Frederick Douglass said that, in the struggle for justice, the only reward is the opportunity to be in the struggle. So, to those of you who are members of the AHA, thank you for your work at supporting our work to fight for secular values in Congress and the courts, our work to build community, identity, and meaning for millions of humanists across America. For the rest of you, I hope you'll take this opportunity to be in the struggle with us. It's going to take all of us. It's going to be uncomfortable. But the only belief system that never asks us to tolerate discomfort is relativism. And the right side of history is always found on the other side of the mountain. We've all got a choice to make about how we respond in this terrible moment. As for me and my house, we will serve humanity. Thank you.